What is up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studio. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Famous. It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you could have me. Oh yeah, I like to play for the people at your next event. You know, I like weddings and parties of all kinds. Video dance party karaoke jams have been what's going on lately. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous.
Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today. For Saturday, March 28th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1. Trump signs $2.2 trillion coronavirus stimulus bill. President Trump on Friday signed into law a $2.2 trillion emergency spending bill intended to help the economy recover from the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. The historic stimulus bill was passed in the House just hours earlier after members of Congress were forced to return to Washington, D.C. to overrule an objection by Representative Thomas Massie, Republican Kentucky, whose opposition to a unanimous voice vote required the House to form a 216-member quorum. The bill authorizes the Treasury Department to send Americans $1,200 payments and provides billions in small business loans. It also expands unemployment benefits and sends additional funding to hospitals in COVID-19 hotspots. There are now 100,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. Congress has scrambled to contain the economic fallout. This is according to CNN and the Washington Post. Number 2, Trump invokes Defense Production Act to mandate GM's ventilation production. President Trump on Friday invoked the Defense Production Act to force General Motors to produce ventilators to aid in the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Trump utilized certain provisions of the DPA, first used as a wartime measure last week, but since many companies immediately shifted their usual manufacturing to medical supply production, he didn't feel a need to invoke the part of the act that can compel any company to produce supplies. Trump noted negotiations with GM had been ongoing, but said GM was, quote, wasting time, end quote, at a critical point in the response effort. So the government will now, quote, require General Motors to accept, perform, and prioritize federal contracts for ventilators, end quote. COVID-19 hotspots have reported ventilator shortages, and the shortage is expected to become more dire. This is according to the Washington Post. Number 3. U.S. tops 100,000 coronavirus cases. The United States became the first country to top 100,000 confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus, as the death toll rose past 1,700, per Johns Hopkins University. Meanwhile, New York City appears poised to become the next epicenter of the pandemic, which has quickly overwhelmed the city's hospitals. While its makeshift 1,000-bed facility in the Javits Center is ready to open, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat, is calling on President Trump to allow the city to create 4,000 more. Mayor Bill de Blasio said he expects the city to run out of resources to fight the virus and treat patients by April 5th, and suggested, quote, half of all New Yorkers, end quote, or more may contract the disease. This is according to Reuters and the New York Times. Number 4, FDA approves 15-minute coronavirus test. The Food and Drug Administration approved Friday a novel coronavirus test for emergency use that can reportedly provide diagnostic results in less than 15 minutes, a major improvement from most tests, many of which take days. The test is produced by Abbott Laboratories, which plans to begin delivering 50,000 per day starting April 1st to places they are most needed, like emergency rooms, urgent care clinics, and doctors' offices. The testing equipment is small and portable and can reportedly be used just about anywhere. Abbott also received approval on another testing system earlier in the week that takes longer to deliver results but can churn out more tests on a daily basis. Between the two systems, the lab hopes to eventually provide 5 million per month. This is according to CNN and Bloomberg. Number 5, Prime Minister Boris Johnson tests positive for coronavirus. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced Friday he has tested positive for the COVID-19 coronavirus. Johnson said he received a coronavirus test after developing a fever and a persistent cough, and he is now self-isolated. Quote, "That's entirely the right thing to do, but be in no doubt that I can continue, thanks to the wizardry of modern technology, to communicate with all of my top team to lead the national fight back against coronavirus," end quote, he said. Johnson recently imposed strict lockdown measures in the United Kingdom amid the coronavirus pandemic, ordering every non-essential shop to close and effectively banning public gatherings. Not long after Johnson's announcement, British Health Secretary Matt Hancock said he also tested positive for COVID-19 with, quote, "mild symptoms," end quote. This is according to Boris Johnson and the BBC. Number 6, stocks take sharp fall to end volatile week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average sank 915 points at closing on Friday, marking the end of a volatile week as the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic continued to ripple through the economy and Congress rushed to pass a historic emergency spending bill to soften the blow and aid Americans who logged a record 3.3 million unemployment claims last week. The S&P 500 dropped 3.4%, and the NASDAQ Composite slid 3.7%. The plunge came after a strong 3-day week of gains as investors looked ahead to a bill that could reinvigorate the economy. Markets have yo-yoed wildly over the past several weeks, and further volatility is expected. This is according to CNBC. Number 7, civil rights leader Joseph Lowery dies at 98. Civil rights leader Joseph Lowery died peacefully from natural causes Friday evening in Atlanta, his family said. He was 98. Lowery was among the ministers who founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., which practiced civil disobedience amid the height of racial unrest in the South. He went on to serve as the group's president for 20 years, during which he helped revive the struggling organization after years of turmoil following King's 1968 assassination. Lowery was known for working in the background behind King, who was the face of the movement. In 1965, in Alabama, after a 5-day, 54-mile voting rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Lowery took protesters' demands to the state's segregationist governor, George Wallace. He is survived by his 3 daughters. This is according to the Washington Post and NBC News. Number 8, Instacart shoppers plan strike to demand coronavirus protections. Shoppers for the grocery service Instacart will stop accepting orders starting Monday to demand better protections amid the COVID-19 pandemic. They're seeking additional, quote, hazard pay, end quote, for every delivery. Paid protections such as hand sanitizer and glove and expanded sick leave. Quote, "It's so scary to be in a grocery store right now," end quote, said Instacart shopper and strike organizer Vanessa Bain. Quote, "While Instacart's corporate employees are working from home, Instacart's gig workers are working on the front lines," end quote. She said, quote, "The health and safety of our entire community is our first priority," end quote, said an Instacart spokesperson. The company offered additional benefits to workers on Friday, adding 30 more days to its 14-day sick leave for those quarantined or sick from COVID-19, but only for those who tested positive for the disease. This is according to Vice News and the Washington Post. Number 9, China closes all movie theaters again after hundreds reopen. Some movie theaters in China recently started to reopen after closing amid the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, but they didn't remain in operation for long. Beijing's Film Bureau, in a notice on Friday, ordered all of China's movie theaters to once again close despite more than 600 cinemas having previously been given approval to reopen. The few hundred theaters that were resuming operations in China represented a fairly small percentage of the theaters in the country, and reports indicated They weren't selling very many tickets. The notice offered no explanation for the reversal, but the government reportedly may be worried about a potential second wave of coronavirus infections. This is according to the Hollywood Reporter. In other non-coronavirus news, number 10, severe weather threatens much of Midwest. Severe weather is forecast for Saturday afternoon and evening in the Midwest, threatening several states. The expected thunderstorms have reportedly put anywhere between 30 million and 70 million people at risk. Some of the stronger storms could potentially bring with them tornadoes, powerful winds, and hail. The weather may extend as far north as central Iowa and southern Wisconsin and stretch all the way down to northeastern Texas and northwestern Louisiana. The storms would reportedly be the result of unseasonably warm, moist air ahead of a rapidly intensifying low-pressure system. Missouri, Iowa, and Indiana are all at enhanced risk of tornadoes. This has been 10 Things You Need to Know Today for Saturday, March 28th, 2020. Thank you for listening. This is What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag #WhatMakesYouFamous. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.
If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube. Username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag #WhatMakesYouFamous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you.